Hey everybody, it's Pastor Megan from Grace Lutheran in San Francisco, and today I have with me,
Mark Sameth,
yeah,
Rabbi Mark Sameth.
yeah, and I'm so excited to be talking to you, Rabbi, because I have been long talking about all of the different ways that sacred scripture has recognized bits of transness and gender expansiveness, and you write quite a bit about the idea that gender is elastic in the Hebrew Bible, and I was wondering if you could tell people a little bit about that.
Sure. So in 2016, I had an op-ed in the New York Times called "Is God Transgender?" and that kind of like got a lot of focus on this topic that I've been researching really since rabbinical school. So altogether now it's about 25 years. And my new book, The Name, A History of the Dual-Gendered Hebrew Name for God, basically puts forth kind of the research that I've done over these years. And I only have one chapter where I kind of unpack and interpret what this might mean. When I say might mean, it's going to be up to us to put it to use in different ways that we find helpful. So it's been a journey for me of real exploration. I've known for a long time that in the Talmud, for instance, the rabbis really do have a very different understanding of gender than I expected. I was kind of surprised to find that the rabbis of the Talmud, so now we're talking about 2,000 years ago, talked about people who are, to use the contemporary terms, assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth, and then later are understood to be have been wrongly assigned, and people who are of no gender, people who are of dual gender. I mean, this is 2,000 years ago, so it wasn't what I was expecting to find in the Talmud. And then my real interest is Bible, and so I was really surprised to find that this whole notion of dual gender goes back a lot further than 2,000 years ago. We're talking about 1400 BCE is when this name of God, the Hebrew name of God, first appears on the scene in its original kind of, in a shortened version, transliterated into hieroglyphics. It's there today on a temple, one of the pillars of an Egyptian temple. And so there is this notion that gender is not fixed, and it's not what we thought it was. And this notion, it shouldn't surprise us. We're all human beings. Human beings share human experiences. Those experiences aren't going to be markedly different, fundamentally different now than they would have been 2,000 or 4,000 years ago. And yet it still is surprising to see it, and wonderful. I think it's wonderful. So yes, so that spectrum of gender is really there from a very, very long time ago.
And how can you tell people kind of how pronouns work in the Hebrew Bible? Like, because there are times when I've read the text and it seems like someone will have the same pronoun for most of the book and then all of a sudden have a different pronoun, like the author in Ecclesiastes and some other folk. Like, how is it that pronouns work in these texts?
Right. So, that's one of the bizarre things about, when you read the Bible, or let's say the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, read the Pentateuch in English. already, I mean, you don't have to know any Hebrew, and already there are some kind of surprising things right there, right there in any copy of the Bible. So I'm thinking of Deuteronomy 32.
Mhm.
And in Deuteronomy 32, God is referred to as your father. I mean, if you look in any Bible, it'll say your father. Then a couple of lines later, it describes your father this way. Your father um, uh, suffers labor pains, uh, gives birth, and suckles. So, oh yeah, oh that kind of father. I got it. You know, I mean, so that's right there on the surface level of any text. Then, if you go into the Hebrew, and your question was about the pronouns, um, it gets lost in translation. So in the Hebrew, for instance, Moses addresses God as Atah, which is the second person singular masculine, you, which is what we'd expect. Moses also addresses God as At, which is the second person feminine singular for you. And of course, in the English translations or in the non-gendered language translations, it just says you. So we miss all of this. Um, the the word, I'll give you the strangest example that I can think of, which is the fact that in the Hebrew Bible, the pronoun she is only spelled correctly in the Pentateuch 11 times, specifically 11 times. All of the other times it's spelled as if it's the pronoun he. And you kind of wonder, like, well, what's that about? Well, maybe we should fix it. But if you go to the Talmud, there's a whole debate amongst the rabbis, and basically the moral of the story is don't change it. We know what it is. We know what we did. It's exactly 11 times. Don't touch it.
Wow.
So what's that about? So then if you talk to modern Bible scholars, they'll say, well, that was just another way of an alternative spelling. That's as if we came across a text in Old English, and where we expected to see the word he, we kept seeing the word she, and then some scholars said, oh yes, well, in this particular text, the S was silent. We wouldn't accept it. It's outlandish. So, right, so the scribal play of pronouns is hinting at something, and then the question is, what's it hinting at?
Do you have any guesses? What it's hinting
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, what I write about in my book is that I think that all of this gender bending, Eve is referred to as he. Noah, after the flood, repairs to her tent. Rebecca is referred to as a young man. Adam is referred to as them. And the rabbis say, well, why is Adam referred to as them? Adam, the Adam, the earth creature, wasn't, in the first telling, is not a male figure. This is the Ur figure, the original human being who is created in God's image as them. And the rabbis say, yes, this original earth creature was an androgyne, was a male-female creature who then gets separated. This is going all the way back to what the rabbis call the Midrash, which is they're unpacking they're expanding on the stories to try to understand what they're about. The Adam, the original earth creature, was created as a dual-gendered androgynous figure in the image of God, and you can fill in the rest of it. Therefore, what this is all hinting at, this play of pronouns, this unusual use of language, is hinting at the quote-unquote dual-gendered nature of God.
Yeah, I like reading the creation story kind of from this lens of what if trans affirming surgeries were intended by God, right? What if the way God creates is to, right, puts Adam to sleep and then performs a surgery, right? This original creation had there was the creation of the being, and then there was this second step that's almost surgical, right? And I've been kind of wondering about this idea of circumcision also kind of being a surgical thing that happens as a part of faith and a part of religious connections, and just being really curious, right? Because I think that's part of how we can read the Bible, is just like ask questions and not feel the need to take a definitive stance. But like, what if God gets surgeries around body parts in a way that we just have not even figured out yet? Right?
Yeah.
What if sacred bodies have scars in similar places to trans bodies? And what does that mean for who is beloved, right? And so I just think there's something really magical in asking questions like that. So I'm super appreciative of all the work that you've done. One of the other things that I know that you write about that has been interesting to me, because early Christians used this imagery from the Hebrew Bible about nursing, and there are a lot of people in the early Jesus movement who would like make paintings of themselves saying that whenever they were teaching faithfully, they were nursing each other. Can you talk a little bit about some of the nursing imagery?
Yeah. I actually got some pushback on this one, so I'm glad you're asking the question.
Yeah.
When my piece in the Times was published, one of the examples I gave was of this gender bending was that Mordecai is described as Esther's nursing father, Omain. Someone took issue, I mean, a scholar I respect took issue with it and said, well, that can mean you're using nursing as in a wet nurse, but the word could also be nurturing. Mordecai nursed, but was the nurturer. So in the next piece I wrote, I was a little more specific because Isaiah uses this term that the future kings of Israel will be nursing kings. And I went and I picked up the other line in Isaiah, which is specifically what that means. Isaiah says that talking to the Israelites, king's breasts you shall suck. I mean, so if there's any doubt as to what this phrase means, and Moses uses the term nursing father, complaining to God, hey, look, I can't be Israel's Omain. I'm just not, find somebody else. I'm not the one. That's kind of like the ideal. And in my book, I speculate that this trope of the nursing king may have come from the pharaoh Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut was a real person, what is considered still by Egyptologists one of the greatest pharaohs to have ever lived, and she reigned in full pharaonic regalia, with the false beard, the traditional pharaonic beard, and there you go. So this picture of the nursing king is not from somebody's imagination. The early Israelites would have known, if they didn't know this pharaoh experienced the reign of this pharaoh, they would certainly have heard the story of this pharaoh, and that becomes kind of this ideal where and much later the Kabbalists take this whole thing and they spin it out into a whole theology and kind of understanding of human nature, which is finding the balance within us. I love Sam Killerman's work on this, and he's talking about, it's not as complicated as we think. If you just think in terms of axes, so sexual orientation, gender, these are all spectrums, and somebody's going to be like all the way over on one side, like cisgender, and somebody's going to be all the way over on the other side, transgender. Somebody's going to be straight, gay, bisexual. It's a spectrum, and the human reality is that we fill out these spectra, and it's about finding where am I on this spectrum, and then being clear with myself, being clear with the world about where I am on these, so I can find my peeps, and make my connections and get my support and make my contribution. It's as simple as that. It's not simple at all, and yet from that perspective, he's very clear about it. I think his is a great contribution.
Yeah, I get a lot of feedback from people online that folk are kind of having their eyes opened for the first time to the fact that God could love them in all of the different ways that they could be embodied in this world. And it's since the kind of Queer Eye episode has come out recently, it's been so many that it's kind of overwhelming. And so I'm wondering if you would be willing to kind of share a message for those who are a part of the Jewish tradition, if they had no idea that any of these things existed, and they've spent some time like Jonah, kind of wallowing in the pain of feeling disconnected from community. I wonder if you have like a message you could share to the folk who might watch this, who are wanting to reconnect with their faith.
Yeah.
Some words for them.
Thank you for that beautiful invitation.
Yeah.
And yeah, so what I would say is that wherever you are, if you are in or were in or still feel somehow affiliated with, connected to the Jewish world, that there are a lot of spaces now that you might not have existed before, and that you might not be aware of. And I say that there are very well-known and welcoming communities, the Reform Jewish community, the Reconstructionist Jewish community. We're finding major changes in the conservative Jewish community, the Jewish renewal community. What people I don't think are what people might be surprised about is that in the Orthodox world, we now have Orthodox transgender, Orthodox gay, lesbian, bisexual rabbis who are looking, and not just looking, but are actively making space for people. So you can be affirmed if you identify. You came out of an Orthodox world, you came out of the Reform world, you came out of the secular world, that just as in the Christian world increasingly, and in the Muslim world that I'm aware of, in Islam, there are more and more places for you to find your connections and to be comfortable and to make your contribution. That's what's so important. Is this is not just like the community, whether it's the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Christian community, plural, welcoming you and bringing you in. We need you. We need each other, and we all have contributions to bring that no one else can bring. Our communities bring contributions that other communities can't bring, and each individual brings something that other individuals can't bring. We need each other. We really look around, and that we all agree right now. We need each other.
Yeah, yeah. No truer words have been stated in times like this, particularly because it's so much easier to feel alone when you're sheltering in place and you can't hear the rhythms of community or sing with folk in close proximity. So yeah. Where can people find you online if they want to read more of your writings, if they want to connect with you?
Sure. So thank you for asking. The easiest, I mean, if you're on Twitter, it's the @ and then 4 breaths. 4 is spelled out, FOUR breaths, @4breaths. Or my website, which is rabbimarksameth.com. And thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. It's been really wonderful chatting with you briefly. I hope that we'll be chatting with each other more in other contexts. I imagine I'm imagining a future where we can get like some trans Muslim scholars and some trans Sikhs and like just get a whole interfaith trans love conversation going, right?
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And not to embarrass you, Megan, and you've invited me to, but, and your community already knows it, but I just want to say it again. They are so lucky to have you. You are such a blessing for them and for all of us. And I wish you continued good health and success in all of your endeavors.
I'll take it and just say thank you. Yeah, it's a mutual love society, definitely. So thank you for joining us. Take care, everybody.